thanks all of you to come today, and I'm very excited to hear there are people from different disciplines and from different parts of the country. So I hope you enjoy it. I have resumed this presentation, as you said, Aki, I presented in the infant mental health week, and it was a little bit longer and more in detail, especially in the neuroscientific part. In this one, I have actually made more emphasis in the attachment and affect regulation, but we'll see. It's a different one, a little bit more resumed, but so the presentation itself, this one in particular, is about how the infant's brain and the mind develops in the context of the baby's relationship with his mother. And I will explain how this early relationship has a vital impact on the development of neural networks and functional brain structures. I will be highlighting the importance of the first 3 years of life, which are the critical years during which major developments take place, like the emergence of the baby's sense of self and the first traits of personality. It is also during this first year of life when crucial psychological and neurological processes will take place and form the foundation that will later enable the child to manage and regulate his emotions and cope with the stress later on in life. And finally, it is during this period when the child will learn and internalize the first and most important model of relationship, primarily based on the baby's experience of attaching to his mother during the first year of life. So this model will inform ways to relate to others and what to expect from others, which will be imprinted in the baby's brain. How do I move forward? Are you seeing the second slide? Yeah?
Yeah.
So before I start the presentation, I would like to clarify that I will use the term mother as a general way to refer to the primary carer. Yeah? It could be the father who's the primary carer, or the grandmother. So the presentation is divided in two parts. The first one, I will talk about the pre and postnatal brain development, a little bit about the mother-infant relationship, about attachment theory and emotional regulation. The second part will be about brain structures and physiology underlying this attachment process and emotional regulation. And I will talk about critical periods of development on the baby's brain. And then we will have hopefully 10 minutes for questions. So let's start. Let's start by highlighting the fact that the brain develops, we start developing from early stages in pregnancy. And if we look at embryonic development, we see dramatic changes in the first 10 weeks. If we take conception, when the sperm fertilizes the egg as a starting point, and we count that as a week number 1, we can see, I don't have it, I'm going forward, number 1. Here's a number 1. It's showing number 1. Yeah. So we will see that, by week number 2, the embryo presents a heart, a process of cell proliferation has begun, an extraordinary production of cells that will later form the brain. But we don't get to see that in here. Obviously, it's happening in the background. By week 4, we can see the signs of limbs. Can use laser point. So we see signs of limbs in here, an eye, and the process of self-reproduction continues in the background. At week 6, these cells start to migrate, to move to where they need to be and organize themselves to later fulfill a function as a part of the central nervous system. And finally, by week 10, you can see a basic structure of brain that is being formed, but now needs to grow, to develop. So it's a kind of really impressive how in 10 weeks, a cell can really become an embryo and then turn into a fetus. But a great deal of brain development really happens in the postnatal period, particularly, now it came up, particularly during the first year of life. And research in the fields of neuroscience reveals that at birth, an infant's brain has only about 25% of its adult weight. And after 6 months, it reaches 50% of adult size and 75% at the end of the second year. So that means that most of the growth of a brain happens in the first 2 years of life. And this growth depends on two factors. One is the infant genes, and the second is the environmental influence. And this could easily invite us to the controversial debate about nature against nurture. But for the moment, and for the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on nurture, meaning the impact of the environment has on the baby's brain. And we know that the baby's environment is mainly mediated by the mother, a mother who is available not only physically, but also emotionally to the baby, and able to respond to the baby's physical and emotional needs. For example, if the baby cries because he's feeling frightened, then the mother would respond in a timely manner by holding him, attuning her emotional response to the baby's state, reducing in this way the baby's discomfort or distress, and restoring a sense of calmness and safety. And it is throughout these experiences that the baby's sense of self begins to emerge. In other words, it is through his bond and relationship with his mother that will enable the baby to begin to exist, to have an experience, and to build a personal ego. As we can see in the top picture here, I have the laser. This is the first encounter between a newborn and his mom. This is a picture taken in a refugee camp in Pakistan. This is the first time the baby has been brought to mom after giving birth. And you can see how this little one is making already eye contact in there. So from that moment after birth onwards, there will be a process of getting to know each other and learning how to respond to each other. As you can see, this mom, this is again a newborn, but you can see this mom kind of trying to figure out, working out what the baby's into it, trying to have a sense of where is he at and how do I doing here. They're very curious. So during this process of getting to know each other, ideally the baby will experience a mother interested in him, a mother able to attune herself to his emotional state and to help him process his internal experience, meaning being in distress, being overexcited, being uncomfortable. And by doing this, the baby will learn to experience a sense of safety or security or protection by having a mom who can actually look after this. And it is precisely through these experiences of having a caring mother, sensitively responding and regulating the infant's needs over and over again, where the secure attachment is formed. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about attachment, yeah? So attachment theory, I'm sure that all of you are familiar, just going to go through it. The main point, is a special bond between the infant and the attachment figure, which is often an adult who is in charge of the baby. This bond is based on the infant's needs for safety, security, and protection. Loss or threat of loss of the person evokes intense distress. This early bond will have huge emotional and social impact that continues throughout life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Bowlby's view. Bowlby, who is the person who actually the pioneer and the one who created the attachment theory, believed that babies were born with an intrinsic need to form affective ties, to instinctively seek for closeness to their mothers with the purpose of feeling protected and safe. He believed that the baby was kind of actually born with a repertoire of behaviors and reflexes whose purpose were to attract and to maintain closeness with their mother, so she could reduce and completely eliminate uncomfortable or overwhelming feelings of restlessness or anxiety or overexcitement, and in this way restoring the feelings of sense of calm, safety in the baby. So the baby is born, in his view, with a biological need to attach to his mother, but this is not enough. The secure attachment of the baby to his mother will depend also on the mother's ability to respond both to physical and emotional needs of the baby. And in this interaction between the mother and the baby begins to develop a pattern of behavior and response between them, which later become the first and most important model of intimate relationship for the baby. And this model will be imprinted in the baby's brain. He will learn from these experiences with his mother what to expect from others, whether the other is available or interested in him and able to help him, and whether or not he's lovable or worthy of love. So this first model of intimate relationship will inform and impact the way that baby and later the child and then the adult will relate to others. So for example, if the baby cries because he's hungry and his need is met by a responsive and loving caregiver, then he will learn that he has a positive effect on the other and that the other is available and interested to help him. And this experience will foster a sense of feeling lovable, worthy of love. So as we're talking about attachment, we somehow are talking about affect regulation. And as I was saying before, the baby needs an adult who could help him to calm down in order to reestablish a sense of security and feeling okay. Initially, it will be the mother who will help the baby to regulate his emotional state by attending to his emotional needs. He's feeling distress, attending if he's feeling frightened, helping the baby to make sense of these experiences and to recover from it. And it is through having the experience over and over again of a parent regulating the emotional experience of the baby, when the baby gradually learns to internalize this function until it becomes a self-regulating later on in life. And you can see this in babies as they grow along, when they are newborn and up to 3 months. They cannot wait. They are not able to regulate anything. But then later on, by 4th or 5th month, you can see that when mom says, "I'm coming 2 minutes, I'm bringing the bottle, hold on," you can see that they can relate a little bit to the voice that kind of containment, and it helps them to anticipate that she's coming. They cannot wait, but they can start anticipating because the experience of the baby has been that when he's hungry, when he's frightened, mom comes back and sorts it out. So they're learning progressively to internalize the function, to wait and to anticipate and to have the capacity to tolerate more and more, thanks to mother's failure, how Winnicott calls it. I mean, a perfect mom's that fits in quickly and provides immediately what the baby needs, doesn't allow the baby to develop the capacity to tolerate more and more. Not only intensity of emotion, but variety of emotion. We're talking not only when the baby's distressed or is hungry, it's also about the baby being overexcited and needs to kind of calm down or kind of modulate that excitement because he's too uncomfortable, he's too overexcited or overtired. Okay, so yeah, here coming back. So a way of helping the baby to regulate himself. Also, there are not two ways, but ways of regulating the baby is by mirroring his emotional state and attuning to it. And I'll talk a little bit about that. No, hold on. Bear with me. There we go. So mirroring is when the mother copies the baby's facial expression, usually of distress, and she ensures that it is seen by the baby. As you can see in here, the baby's in distress, as it is in here. So there is a face-to-face, where the baby have access to the mom's face of distress. And in this way, the mother enables the baby to find a reflection of himself in the mother's eye or in the mother's mind. The feeling of being seen and recognized in the mother's mind. So the mother then can name the feeling. "Oh dear, you feel so upset And through the experience of being mirroring in this way, the baby will learn or can learn to know how he's feeling, learn to know what is the feeling inside of him, because mom is reflecting that experience back to him. Attunement involves an adult being able to resonate with the baby's emotional state. This could be resting state, a little bit of what we're seeing here, or excited state, and to fine-tune the intensity, the mother who's very excited at the same level probably of the baby, intensity and duration. Duration depend on how small the baby is. This is a newborn, they wouldn't be able to hold the level of eye contact or the intensity of emotion for too long is too much. So the mother will carefully attune herself to the emotional pitch of the baby and intensify or decrease her interaction with them, either to raise the emotion in the baby or the affectivity by, for example, if a baby that is a little bit withdrawn, or to lower it when the baby is hyper aroused and to a level that can be more tolerable, helping in this way to regulate the baby's emotions. And now I would like to move into how parents and infant interaction impacts the infant's brain development. In other words, how the infant's brain develops in the context of baby's relationship with his mother. So as I mentioned before, the brain is made of millions of cells that migrate to specific places and organize themselves to fulfill their function. And these cells are called neurons. So I'm going to go very briefly through here. A neuron is a nerve cells that transmit information in the brain. So if you look at it, the neuron has four basic parts. The axon, which is covered by a fatty layer called myelin that helps to speed the transmission of information. It has also the dendrites, which are these ramifications over here, and they have the soma with the nucleus, axon, and they have the axon terminals. So the neuron receives information from other neurons through the dendrites and sends information along the axon through the axon terminals into the next neuron. This is how the information flows. So when two neurons connect with each other is what is called synapses. And neural networks are formed by activations of synapses. That means the connection of one neuron to another and another one, and so on. So what we're seeing here is information coming through the dendrites, traveling through the soma and axons, out of the axon terminals into the next neuron. So what is happening here, the connection between one neuron and the other, where information is exchanged, is called synapses. And what we're going to see in the baby's brain for the first year of life is an amazing and incredible capacity to produce synapses. So these networks are transmitting information back and forth, and they are formed originally by activations of synapses, as we see here. So when an infant is exposed to a stimulus or experience, for example, his mother's smile, a path of circuits will be activated in areas related to emotional functional. No, hold on, yeah. A path of circuits will be activated in areas related to emotional functioning. And if this experience is repeated over and over again, then these circuits will become hardwired and will get imprinted in the brain. So what will happen in the brain of the baby during the first year of life will be activations of synapses, depending on the type and frequency and quality of stimulation that the baby will be exposed to. For example, if the baby has the experience of having a sensitive caregiver being able to respond and regulate the baby's physical and emotional experience in a timely and consistent manner, then this experience will activate a path of circuits in areas related to emotional functioning, all those areas related to emotional regulation, which are the limbic system, the baby's stress response system, the prefrontal cortex, etc. In this way, the baby will experience a variety of emotion and learn that this state will be recognized and regulated by the mother. If these experiences are repeated over and over again, then these circuits will become hardwired and get imprinted in the brain. I'm repeating the same thing over and over again because this needs to be understood this way. So this applies as well to motor and cognitive, not only emotional experiences, also motor and cognitive experiences are working in the same way. If the baby has a mother talking and singing and reading and cooing to the baby, will stimulate the neural activity in language-related areas. So the lack of experience will also be reflected in the baby's brain by showing less neural network, less activation of synapses, and less complexity in their networks. Lack of experience can be related to depressed or over-anxious mothers, preoccupied with their own state of mind. So it's likely that these mothers are not going to be as available as other mothers to respond to the baby's emotional needs. Could be emotional needs of being soothed or being regulated or being played with. So there will be perhaps less opportunities for the baby unless that there is a father, there is a grandmother, there is an older child who could actually be activating these areas of the brain by interacting with the baby. So you can see how the architecture of the baby's brain, how these neural networks and synapses will be shaped by the baby's experience with his mother and the nature of this relationship with her. So the picture on the right shows a cross-section of the cortex that have been photographed. The neurons have been stained. You can appreciate how complex the networks become. This is a human cortex photograph. The more experiences that the baby have, the more complex and dense these networks will become. Particularly positive emotional experiences will be vital during this first year of brain development. The experience of being held, soothed, understood, played with, and enjoyed by the mother will greatly impact the architecture of the baby's brain and its capacity to achieve higher levels of functionality. On your left, this is how a mature neuron looks like. I thought this photograph was quite impressive, as you can see, it has a long axon and its branches has multiplied. So you can imagine how many synapses this neuron can form if it makes use of all its extensions. So the amount of synapses in the adult brain, it is hard to comprehend. We don't know yet. Scientific think that on average, an adult brain has a quadrillion synapses. The capacity of an infant's brain to produce synapses early in life is extraordinary, especially during the first 18 months of life. And it is believed that an infant's brain produces twice as many connections as those in an adult brain. And this proliferation of synapses is a crucial process in the development of a brain. At the same time, as there is that overproduction of synapses, the brain goes through a natural process called the process of pruning. So this is a natural process where there is a reduction of dendrite cells and connection between cells. So those synapses which are pruned are because we don't use them. In other words, prune is due to lack of use. So the networks that get used prevail in the brain, and those are not reinforced get pruned. For example, in infant language development, the language development depends on the experience of the infant having an adult talking to him, singing to him, reading, etc. In doing so, the infant's brain gets to activate the circuits that are responsible for language development. And the constant activation of these circuits, mom reading the book every night and mom talking to him and mom singing and dad being also part of. It will prevent those connections, those cells, and those paths to get pruned because they've been reinforced over and over again. But if these circuits are not activated, in other words, they don't get used, then pruning is more likely to happen. And this could have major implications for language development. And that applies to other areas, motor-wise and social-wise, etc. A little bit about the lack of emotional, when there is a real lack of emotional, social, or cognitive stimulation, or when it's severe, like the cases of severe neglect, where babies are not talked to, or held, or thought about, then only those few synapses or neurons that have been used will remain. And I just want to kind of take you through a little bit about an extreme example of neglect and pruning. So excess pruning can take place due to many different factors. One of them is neglect, and I'm going to be talking about extremely deprived neglect. And this picture is taken from one of the Romanian orphanage created during the government of Nicolae Cascai. And these orphanages, which I'm sure you have heard of, were found by the UN in the 80s and was a scandal due to the inhuman conditions in which infants and children lived. There were rows of hundreds of babies in cots, and they were only touched either to get their nappies changed or to be fed. So they spent days and weeks and months and years without human contact. Only the physical needs of the infants were met, and not emotional. And you might have heard about the studies with Spitz, this who has studied these children's development, and his findings show that the lack of human contact of this infant led to the death of 40% of them, only not having human contact. And this is, again, just to remind you, an extreme example of negligence. So lack of effective social and cognitive stimulation causes significant loss of connections and or the activation of networks. So the process of neglect is reflected in the brain through significant loss of connections between neurons and the activation of networks, as we can see in the following here. So this is an MRI taken by Bruce Perry, who have studied in great extent children treatment. And as you can see, the left-hand scan shows the brain of a normal 3-year-old with a healthy brain development. And the right-hand scan shows the brain of a child of the same age who suffers severe neglect. And what we see here is dramatic differences in size, one bigger than the other one. The lack of neural mass due to excessive pruning. What we're saying is gray matter, you know, the cortex in here. Look how gray and compact it looks. And how in here it looks as if there are holes in here and quite not as compact. That says about the lack of synapses, networks, gray matter. And very interesting, they have actually talked about the brain not only not developing, but also shrinking from lack of stimulation of neglect. So during these 3 years of development, as we have been saying, there is a propensity of the infant's brain to change these neural networks in response to stimulation or lack of it. That means that the infant needs to be exposed to experience of touch, sight, sound, smell, movement, but also to be held, kissed, rocked, and sung to by his caregiver in order to develop emotionally. And each of these experiences will create synapses, then later on will become patterns of synapses and networks that by repetition of the same experience over and over again, it will become hardwired. So up to now, I have talked about, just to summarize where we are at, I'm just checking the time. Okay, 10 minutes. So I have explained how the infant's brain develops mainly in the first 2 years of life and how that development depends on the environment that he is exposed to. I have explained that during that early infancy, there is an extraordinary production of neurons and synapses, allowing the brain a full potential to be organized by the baby's experience of his environment. And as there is a process of overproduction of synapses, the brain also goes through a process of pruning, getting rid of those neural networks and synapses that are not in use, shaping in this way the architecture of the brain. And I point out how excessive pruning relates to neglect. I now would like to talk about the brain's critical periods for development. And a critical period is throughout the development of the brain. There are critical periods, which are windows where certain things are going to develop and depends on specific stimulation happening. Yeah. So critical periods have been defined as a overproduction of synapses in which specific types of experience are needed. For example, as I explained, language development, talking to the infants, or could be the mother's responsive gaze in terms of emotional development and holding the infant. Development not only occurs if there is a particular experience during the critical period, which I will explain. So during this period of critical periods, which happen at different times in different areas of the brain throughout development, but very crucially during the first 3 years of life, it goes on into adolescence, there is an overproduction of synapses, like the brain is prepared, produces all sort of cells and synapses to be sculpted in its own stimulation to kind of being reorganized and become more functional and higher functional. For example, talking to the baby will actually develop brain areas and there will be more increasing language development. Now, research into critical periods of the brain, it's still ongoing. There are a few numbers of critical periods that have been identified, like the language-wise, motor skills. But today I'll take you through 2 particular critical periods, which I think are relevant for early infancy. And the first one happens around the 2nd month of life, begins between week number 6 and 8. And it's a critical period right in the occipital lobe, right in here where the vision areas are. And that at that point, after week 6 or 8, there is an increase of synapses connection there. And this is when the neural system responsible for vision is ready to receive visual stimulus in order to develop a more controlled and focused vision. Perhaps some of you have noticed that. If you have observed infants or if you work with infants, you see that after week 6 or 7, you can see that the baby's vision start to be more focused. And it is precisely during that moment where the baby starts making eye contact and registering familiar faces. And it is important the face-to-face interaction at this stage, in particular the mother's gaze, which is the primary source of visual affective information for the infant's brain. So at this stage, a baby is fully aware of the difference between an attentive adult and one who is not attentive. So one of those, when you talk to a baby and you talk directly to the baby and you're talking with an expectation, that he will hear you, that he will respond somehow. They feel that, they are aware of that, or of another adult who will say, hey, hey, hi, so being totally present for the baby. And it is not by chance that is precisely during that time, week 8, where the social smile appears. Whereas before seems to be an instinct kind of smile, they come and go. This seems to be more responsive smile to the other over there. Then the second critical period is the critical period of emotional development, which is the one that I have been talking today, which goes from the moment of birth up to 3 years. And it's throughout this period that there will be a massive significant synapses growth in the right hemisphere, limbic system, and other significant brain structures, which are very much related to emotional response. And these structures underlie the process of affect regulation and attachment process. And that's why perhaps it is so critical, the presence and responsiveness of a consistent and sensitive caregiver during this period. Bear with me, the next stage. So the key points of the presentation today is most of the infant brain's development happens in the first 2 years of life. The infant's brain development is mainly shaped by his relationship with his mother and the importance of early intervention during this infancy.